And let's back up a little bit in this teaching. So after the Lord, we're going to go real back, just give some context. After the Lord had confused the languages, again, at the Tower of Babel, the world at this point was walking in complete rebellion against the Lord. Nobody was walking with the Lord. Everyone was doing what was right in their own eyes. And as promised in the Garden of Eden, when man fell, the Lord promised us, humanity, that he would make a way for salvation for all people. And again, after the Tower of Babel, this is when the Lord chose a man who lived in Ur called Abram. And Abram, again, he wasn't walking with the Lord. He was worshiping the sun and the moon and the celestial bodies. But the Lord decided, I'm going to choose you. And through you, Abraham, through your seed, the Savior of the world is going to come. And he is what we call the first patriarch, Abraham. And Abraham married Sarah. And after many years of being barren, they finally bore a son together. And they named him Isaac, who Isaac is the second patriarch of God's promise. And Isaac, like his parents, he and his wife Rebekah had trouble conceiving. However, when Rebekah implored and cried out to the Lord heard her and opened her womb, and she gave birth to twin boys. Remember the boys' name? Esau and Jacob. Esau was a redhead man. He had a lot of hair. They called him Big Red. And we have Isaac. They called him, or Isaac. We had Jacob. And through Jacob would come the promise of salvation for all people. And the Lord went against the cultural norms of the day and chose Isaac, because Isaac is a second-born son. And the Lord decided that he was going to be the carrier of the Abrahamic covenant and blessing. And when it came time to give that blessing, Isaac was going to bless his son Esau, the oldest, in secrecy. But his wife Rebekah gets wind of this. He tells Jacob, her favorite, hey, your father's about to bless Esau. How about we put on some goat skin and you go in, I'll make him some of his favorite jumbo that he loves, and we're going to lie and deceive, and you, Jacob, are going to take the blessing. So they formulated this plan to trick his old man, and it worked. It succeeded. And Esau hears what Jacob had done in deceiving him and his father. And Esau, his oldest brother, vows, once dad dies, you're going to die next. I will kill you. So Isaac book-tailed, and he heads toward Haran, his mother's homeland. And as Isaac comes to Haran, he meets a pretty girl named Rachel, who he falls head over heels for. And come to find out, Rachel's father, his name is Laban, which is Jacob's mother's brother, which makes Jacob Laban's nephew. So Uncle Laban. And it's perfect because, again, they're from the same tribe. And before Jacob left, mom and dad said, hey, marry from someone from our tribe. And for a while, Jacob worked under Uncle Laban for free. But then Laban decides, let's put money into our relationship, which I said last time. When money enters families in a family relationship, it's never good. It's never going to be a good sign. And Laban says, Jacob, you've been working for me for a long time. How much do you want to get paid? And Jacob says, I don't want to get paid. I would rather work for your daughter, which this would have been a sense of pride. It's not some, they were working for women. No, this would have been, how long did your boyfriend work for you to get married? 7 years? Oh my goodness. So it's something to be proudful of. And so for 7 years, Jacob allegiates himself to Laban and works for him for 7 years. And after the 7 years are done, Jacob asks for his wife, Rachel, Laban's daughter. But if you remember, Laban also had another daughter named Leah. And on Jacob's wedding night, Laban did a switcheroony, and he switched Rachel for Leah. And Jacob wakes up in the morning and comes to find out the woman on my bed is not my wife. And so he goes to Uncle Laban saying, what have you done? Why have you deceived me and tricked me like this? And Laban comes up with a kind of twisted back on him. Hey, I can't give the younger daughter before the older daughter. And so he's deceived. Jacob eventually marries Rachel, but he works another 7 years for Uncle Laban, having 2 wives, Rachel and Leah. And here we come to, I guess, the principle and the application for tonight's message. Again, blueprint for a broken marriage. Unsurprisingly, Jacob marrying 2 women is going to cause a lot of strife. A lot of strife within the marriage. And again, marriage is a wonderful and a beautiful thing. We've talked about this previously, so I won't go super in depth. But it's a beautiful covenant. The Lord's first establishment upon this world was marriage. However, because of man's sin and the fallen nature, the enemy has found a way to worm his way between a husband and a wife and cause something which is beautiful to become something potentially horrid and unfortunately broken. And we're going to discuss about this as we read, starting in verse 31 of chapter 29, about how to have a blueprint for a broken marriage. So starting in verse 31. When the Lord saw Leah was unloved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. So Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben, for she said, "The Lord has surely looked on my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me." Then she conceived again and bore a son and said, "Because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also." And she called his name Simeon. Then she conceived again and bore a son and said, "Now this is the time my husband will become attached to me, because I've borne him 3 sons." Therefore his name was called Levi. And she conceived again and bore a son and said, "Now I will praise the Lord." Therefore she called his name Judah. Then she stopped bearing. So this account starts off with the Lord seeing that Leah, Jacob's other wife, is unloved in the marriage. And again, Leah wasn't Jacob's first choice of the matter. And you can argue that Leah and Rachel weren't anybody's first choice. Again, Rachel is really beautiful. She catches every guy's eye, but you gotta ask the question, why has no one married her? Again, the family that she comes from, a bunch of deceivers and liars and tricksters. I don't want to leave him for a father-in-law. And you can imagine Leah has some part to play in this. Now, it says the Lord had compassion upon Leah because she is unloved, and the Lord opened her womb, and she conceived and she gave birth to her firstborn child called Reuben, which Reuben means, "Behold, a son." Jacob, I've given you a son, behold. After she gave birth, she exclaimed, "Now therefore my husband will love me." If you're taking notes, I'm going to have a couple of slides here. Again, the blueprint for a broken marriage. Number 1, how to have a blueprint for a broken marriage? Loving other things. Where do I get this? From verse 31. When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved. Marriage doesn't fall apart just because you stop loving. It falls apart because you start loving the wrong things more than your spouse. And we've talked about this before extensively, but love is not just a feeling. You can say it's a part of it, but that's not the foundation of what love is. Love is a choice. I like to say love is a verb. And when a husband and a wife, when they say "I do," and when they say their marriage vows before one another and before the Lord, they promise to love each other despite what life circumstances may bring. Now, Jacob had Rachel, and Jacob clearly loved Rachel more than he loved Leah. But I think the principle is still true. And it needs to be addressed that when a couple starts to become infatuated and love other things before their spouse, it's going to cause heartache, and for the title, it's going to cause brokenness. Partial love is still painful. Can you imagine if your dad said, "I love you 30%." You know, dang, Dad, where'd the other 60 go? It's towards something else. Leah, and again, she wasn't completely rejected. We see that they're having marital affairs. But she wasn't clearly loved. And a person you can't starve your spouse, from love and expect your marriage to thrive. I really don't love my spouse, but I gotta be with her. Your marriage is not gonna thrive. I'm sorry. You can't build a healthy marriage on divided affections. I love this, I love that, I love my sports, I love going to the gym, I love my work, and I love my wife too. It's gonna cause a disaster. A heart split between your spouse and other loves is going to cause instability. What are some examples? I think this affects women more than it affects men of the example I'm about to give. And don't worry, men will have their share too. But loving your children. You can, I love my children. Moms can feel very proud of this. And I think dads too, but I think it more so affects women again. I love my children to the point that where's the husband is just kind of an afterthought. And the children come before dad. Or how about for the men, work? And if you're in ministry is important because the Lord has called us to ministry, and I have to work because I have to provide for my family. You know what it says in what is it, 1 Timothy chapter 2? I have to work, but then your work and your ministry becomes more important than your household, and you're not being the priest of your household. You're not loving your family. And so what you prioritize, and again, I'm using you generally speaking, I'm not directing anyone. But what you prioritize reveals what you truly love. And Jacob's actions made it clear. Guys, love, again, it's an action. Love must be demonstrated. It can't just be declared. It can't just be said, I love you. I love you. But show me that you love me. Very much like our relationship with the Lord, as we've been talking about in James. I love Jesus. I love the Lord with all my heart. Yeah, but you're not really showing your affection toward him, are you? So, again, I have a couple examples about how to love your spouse. I think affirming them, affirmation is super important. I think spending quality time with them, and again, you can apply this to the Lord as well. Having that intimacy, which we'll talk about later on, the communication, sacrificing, women submitting unto him, men loving, truly cherishing your wife, washing her over with the word of God. Practically speaking, all right, Josh, get really practical. Make them a cup of coffee in the morning. Fill up her car. Before it goes on E. Give them hugs. Go out on dates. It's so crazy that when people get married, they just stop going on dates. No phones present, or call them and FaceTime them. Don't just message them. You can even, to get real basic. Hey, guys, massage her feet when her feet are sore and she's been up at 3 a.m. Trying to get the child to go to bed. Ladies, rub his back and tell him, wow, you are super handsome today. Compliment them and speak well of your spouse. Because again, as I said before, the moment a couple says, I do, before the Lord, is a moment that a husband, it's just husband and a wife against the world. And you get to build something together that's God-honoring and that's holy. But you're not going to be able to do that if you're spending every night, playing video games for 6 hours. Or every Friday night, you go off with your girls and just have a girls' night, and he's eating dinner alone at the table, and he's going to bed, or she's going to bed alone. What you love, again, what you prioritize shows what you love. And Jacob clearly did not love Leah. So Leah conceives, and she has more children. And she gives birth to her second son called Simeon, which means hearing. Even though Leah is having children, Jacob, as we see, is still not willing to love her. But again, he loves to use her body, And the third child Leah names is Levi, which means attachment, holding on to. This is our second point, blueprint for a broken marriage. Validation through performance. Where do I get this? Verse 34. She conceived again and bore a son and said, now, this time my husband would become attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons. Trying to get validated. And marriage begins to break when love is sought through performance instead of through the covenant. And a marriage will not thrive when love has to be earned. A marriage thrives when love is given. Leah believed, if I just do more, if I just have more kids for my husband, then he will love me. Then I'll measure up to par. But performance-based love causes or creates pressure, not intimacy. And when love is correlated and attached to what you produce, the relationship is going to be exhausting, it's going to break, and it's not going to be lovely. And again, I'm trying to, you can also apply this to the Lord. That's not what I'm trying to do. But this is also a relationship with the Lord. Thank the Lord our relationship is not built upon, validation and performance, because we would all fail. There will be moments, again, let's not be naive. There will be moments when either husband or wife fall short, whether that's something small or whether that's something truly hurtful or deep disappointment. And for that instance, if the love is based upon performance, those moments are going to feel like failure instead of opportunities for grace and mercy. Instead of covering each other, you start measuring each other. I don't know, honey, you're not really measuring up to par. I don't know, honey, your bank account is not doing well. Maybe you need to start working more. Maybe the ladies say, if I cook a good meal, then he'll start showing me attention. Or, I went to work all day. You need to appreciate me more. Or if my body looked like those other girls, then he would desire me. Or once I obtain this promotion from work and then I get the bigger paycheck, then she will truly respect me because now I have a title. Or, I'm going to be extra nice today so I can get something later tonight. You can never do enough to secure what should be freely given, I should say. And we see right here that Leah, she had 3 sons and still felt unloved. And hopefully he'll attach, that our relationship will be attached together. But when validation is the goal, that's the moment that your relationship starts to become like a transaction. I do this, and then you give me that. Then you show me affection. But if you don't do this, then I'm not showing you affection. Again, it's like a transaction. Instead of loving Jacob, Leah was trying to win Jacob. If your identity depends on your spouse's response, your peace is going to be unstable. Because you're always wondering, did I do enough? Have I done enough for them to truly love me and cherish me? Am I good enough for them? Is my love dependent upon if I make them a good enough sandwich? Love, guys, should never be withheld. Remember that when y'all are in this stage of life. Love should never be withheld, and it should never be performance-based. Because here's the thing, you're never going to measure up. There's always going to be someone making more money. There's always going to be a girl that's prettier. There's always going to be someone who this and that overlooks. You will never measure up. That's why your relationship cannot be based upon your performance. Broken marriage is built when one person is performing for love and the other is withholding it. As we just read, Leah conceived one last time. And the 4th son born to Jacob from Leah, his name was Judah, which his name means praise. I don't know if this is a shift, but instead of Leah focusing on, again, her pain and her longing for her husband Jacob, it seems like she's starting to focus on the Lord, and she names her child, all right, praise the Lord. Number 3, blueprint for a broken marriage. Looking to your spouse to fill what only God can fill. Where do I get this? Verse 35. And she conceived again and bore a son and said, now I will praise the Lord. A marriage begins to break, y'all, when you expect your spouse, your husband or your wife, to meet the needs that God can only meet. Struggles will ensue when your spouse becomes your source instead of the Lord. Leah wasn't just wanting love. She was wanting and looking for Jacob to give her worth. Jacob, just give me worth. And again, this obviously creates pressure on the relationship because you need constant reassurance. You interpret every little thing you do through actions. Your joy rises or it falls based on, how they thought of you or how they treat you. And again, this is not just for marriage. You can also apply this to dating as well. Teenagers and even adults, instead of leaning on the Lord for fulfillment and contentment in their season of life, I just want someone. I want to be in a long-term relationship. They look for other things, for that puzzle piece in their heart to put in other things, which is like relationships or money or accolades or fame. But those puzzle pieces will not fit because that piece is for the Lord. you're going into marriage, think that all will be well with your spouse, and my wife will completely satisfy me, and my husband will always, completely satisfy me. The marriage is going to be in for a rocky road. Only the Lord can bring true contentment and true fulfillment that each of us need. Too often as well, couples build a relationship with God on each other. And I think many times it's the man. There's this pretty girl that he sees in youth group, and he's like, man, she's really following the Lord. And I really like her. I'm going to start walking with the Lord as well, which I guess, provoke one another to good works. That can be fine. But then when the relationship ends, he ends as well. He's like, all right, I'm not following the Lord anymore. Your relationship on the Lord, guys, take this to heart. Your relationship on the Lord cannot be dependent upon your spouse. Cannot be dependent upon your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your husband or your wife or your friendship, any type of relationship. You need to have your own walk with the Lord. As we talked about again, make your faith your own. You need to have your own walk with the Lord because your spouse will not be able to help you. Maybe they can do practical things, but at the end of the day, it's you. What only God can provide. Never mind. But again, as we see from this section, Leah, she kept receiving what she thought would fix her pain. Children, blessing, being fruitful. But the deeper issue remained untouched. Why? Because she's trying to solve a spiritual need, a spiritual issue with a human solution. You can receive more and you can still feel empty because you're looking at the wrong places. This is why you can be married and still feel lonely. You can be loved and still feel insecure. You can have proof of love and still feel unloved. Because the need is not just external, it's internal. I would say even the need is spiritual. Leah didn't need more of Jacob. She needed a deeper satisfaction in the Lord. Until that was addressed, nothing else would have satisfied her soul. Let's speed up. Chapter 30. Let's read this big section, verses 1 through 13. Now when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, Jacob's other wife, Rachel envied her sister and said to Jacob, give me children or else I die. And Jacob's anger was aroused against Rachel, and he said, am I in the place of God who has withheld from you the fruit of your womb? So she said, here's my maid Bilhah. Go into her, and she will bear a child on my knees, that I also may have children by her. Then she gave Bilhah her maid as wife, and Jacob went into her. And Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, God has judged my case, and he has also heard my voice and given me a son. Therefore she called his name Dan. And Rachel's maid Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, with great wrestlings I've wrestled with my sister, and indeed I have prevailed. So she called his name Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, she took Zilpah, her maid, and gave her to Jacob as a wife. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, a troop comes. So she called his name Gad. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, I am happy, for the daughters will call me blessed. So she called his name Asher. So Rachel, Jacob's first love, the lady who he fell head over heels for, starts to become envious, having that envy. Why? Because she can't bear any children. Unlike Leah, she's barren. She's infertile. And in Rachel's time, this would have been very serious. So in despair and envy, she goes to her husband and demands, honey, you better give me a child or I'm going to die. And Jacob responds pretty honestly and says, hey, I can't open your womb. If God is in control, I can't control that. Number 4, blueprint for a broken marriage. Building your relationship, your marriage, on comparison. Where do I get this? Verse 1. Now when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister. A marriage begins to crumble When one spouse measures love and measures worth or success by comparing themselves to others. Comparison poisons contentment. Rachel's focus on Leah's children made her blind to what God was trying to do in her life. Guys, marriage thrives in gratitude and thankfulness. Lord has given us so much, not envy. And you can't enjoy your marriage if you're too busy resenting someone because they have this or they have that. I wish we were like the Joneses. Or, her husband drives a Ford and we drive a Chevy. Or, I wish my wife looked more like, my secretary. Or comparing. Or you see your friend's spouse, posting a fancy dinner on Instagram. Or they're on this vacation. You're like, man, I wish we could do that. And instead of, putting that away, you start to harbor on it. And suddenly you're, I can't cook like her. And then your home cooked meals feel like a failure. And then that starts causing resentment. And then that starts to fracture the relationship. And then that starts to break. Again, just because of envy. We'll talk about envy as we get to Jacob later on, or Joseph. You can't enjoy the love you have if you're too busy resenting what someone else has. And it focuses on your perceived shortcomings. There's an old adage, and it says that comparison is the thief of joy. If you keep comparing yourself to others, to other families, to other wives, to other husbands, you're not going to have joy. In marriage, this is literal. When you focus on what another couple has, they have a larger home, they can go on more frequent, vacations, or they have a seemingly more attentive spouse. I wish my husband was more attentive like him. You become blind to the strength of the union that the Lord has brought together. We're going to go a little faster. But we see Rachel, she tells her husband, all right, you can't give me children. All right, here, go into my maid, Bilhah, which is a euphemism for it. You can guess what. And we're going to have a child that way. Think of like Sarah and Hagar. Abraham, the Lord's not giving us a child. Take Hagar, my slave. And Bilhah conceived, and she bore many children. Dan, which means judgment, and Naphtali, which means wrestling. And Rachel mentions in verse 8 that she has prevailed. Interesting point because, again, at this point, Leah has 4 children and Rachel only has 2. Maybe she thought that she was going to get ahead some way and, I'm going to beat Leah. I'm almost there. I'm halfway there. I'm not really sure what that means. A lot of commentators are a little skeptical about that too. But number 5, how to break up a marriage? Substituting instead of solving problems. Substituting. We get this from verse 3 and 4. So she said, here's my maid Bilhah. We have a problem. How can we fix a problem? Here's my maid Bilhah. Go into her, and she will bear a child on my knees, that I may also have children by her. Then she gave Bilhah her maid as wife, and Jacob went into her. Instead of addressing the heart issue, her own infertility, her relationship with Jacob, Rachel substitutes a solution through someone else. And this substitute did not solve Rachel's jealousy or envy. Instead, it intensified the rivalry that Leah and Rachel had. Let's expound upon this, guys. Avoiding the real, if you have an issue in your future marriage, avoiding it will cause greater and bigger problems. And substitutes never fix the root. They just multiply and cause more stress and cause more rivalry. You need to have honesty, you need to have candor in a relationship. That needs to be foundational. Without being truthful, when issues arise, it's going to cause more heartache, it's going to cause more brokenness, and it's going to cause more issues. Now think of a couple having communication problems. We just can't seem to communicate with one another. But instead of being honest, instead of both of them sitting down and being vulnerable with one another, they start to implement, all right, I'm going to give him the silent treatment. And then there's silence. This is how we're going to fix it. No, you're substituting the issue. You're substituting the solution. Communication is not going to be solved by giving the silent treatment. or if I just give her this gift after we've had a big fight or a big issue, then we're going to be all good. No, that's just putting a band-aid over a major gash. Or I'm just going to overschedule the family calendar because every time we sit down, for more than a day, we just get at each other. And so we're always going to be busy, busy, busy. So we never really have to spend time with one another because we always fight, again, that you're substituting. Or bringing in a third party. Like I'm gonna talk to my mom about my husband. My husband does this and does that. Again, you're substituting. Instead of going to your husband and trying to reconcile, let me just go to somewhere else. The problem isn't solved when you men, I don't like being at home, so I'm just gonna work, overtime and not be home with my family and my kids. I'm gonna do doomsday scrolling. I'm gonna use substances to numb the pain and the discomfort. The problem is never solved when you use those things. It's simply just buried underneath a layer of dopamine-seeking behavior. Unsolved problems, guys, accrue emotional interest. You don't solve a problem, you just sweep it under the rug, it's going to become more and more and more, and then finally, the relationship's going to break. Left untouched, left unaddressed, it's going to rot your marriage. Hence, when problems arise, we need to know and accept that solving a problem is supposed to feel a little bit uncomfortable. It makes me a little, it's not hard. It is hard, sorry. The burn of a difficult conversation is a sign that your relationship is growing. You have that honesty with one another. And here's the thing. Rachel got a son. She got a son through Bilhah, her slave. But did she get peace of mind? Not really. And Leah noticed that she stopped conceiving as well. And in response, very much like Rachel, Rachel gave her slave to my husband, now I'm going to give my slave to Jacob as well. She gives Zilpah, and Zilpah gives birth to two sons, Gad, which means troop or good fortune, and Asher, which it just means like happy. Well, coming toward the end, verse 14. Now Reuben went in the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes, we'll come back to that, in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also? And Rachel said, therefore, he will lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes. Take note of that. When Jacob came out of the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, you must come in to me, for I have surely hired you with my son's mandrakes. And he lay with her that night. And God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. Leah said, God has given me my wages, because I've given my maid to my husband. So she called his name Issachar. Then Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. And Leah said, God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will dwell with me, because I have borne him six sons. So she called his name Zebulun. Afterwards she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah. So Reuben, again, Leah's son, you remember. We read that he's in the field, again, he's in the field during the harvest time, and he stumbles upon mandrakes. And he brings them, he takes them out of the field and brings them to his mom. What are mandrakes? Mandrakes are a type of plant, and you can kind of see the roots kind of resemble looking like a weird alien or a human. But in like the near Eastern culture, they were believed to help with fertility enhancing properties, helping women conceive and bear children. Again, symbolic, not necessarily medicinal, but this is what they thought mandrakes were. If you take these, if you ingest these, then you're going to be fertile and you will have kids. And so Reuben has a bunch of these. And again, you remember, Rachel is barren. She cannot have any kids of her own until this point. So Rachel knows this and asks Leah for her, hey, can you give me some of your son's mandrakes? And Leah's response is that, what? You've taken away my husband, and you think I'm just going to give you mandrakes? And Rachel tells her that, hey, if you give me the mandrakes, then I'll tell Jacob that you two should come together tonight. There's really no way to soften that. And so when Jacob comes home, he does just that. And the Lord opens Leah's womb again, and she gives birth to 2 more children, as we just read. Zebulun, dwelling, which means dwelling, and Dinah, nothing really interesting about her. Number 6, this is our last point. If you want to break your marriage, you're going to start bargaining for intimacy. I was debating back and forth, should I include this? But here we are. I get this from verse 15 and 16 specifically. Rachel said, "Therefore he will lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes." When Jacob came out of the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "You must come in to me, for I have surely hired you with my son's mandrakes." And he lay with her that night. Imagine hiring your husband for him to spend time with you. A marriage begins to break when spouses try to buy, trade, and manipulate intimacy instead of trying to cultivate it through love and connection. Intimacy, guys, is not a bargaining chip. It's not like, guess what I got here? And Rachel tried to negotiate a night with Jacob for Leah instead of in exchange for those mandrakes. Again, treating love and physical closeness as something to be earned. Marriage, intimacy is a gift. It's not a transaction. Marital closeness and intimacy should not be hung over a spouse in order for them to get, for you to do something or to receive something. If you have to negotiate it, you're never going to be satisfied in that relationship. In marriage, also, your body is not your own. Biblically speaking, your body belongs to your spouse. And they should never have to beg their partner for closeness and intimacy. A partner who offers intimacy as a bribe, if you do this, then maybe I'll give you that. That's just opening a can of worms. Intimacy and affection are sacred. It's not a currency to get what you want. By the way, withholding yourself from your spouse is sexual immorality. That's what Paul said. Verse 22 and 24, and we'll wrap it up here. Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. And she conceived and bore a son and said, "God has taken away my reproach." So she called his name Joseph and said, "The Lord shall add to me another son." So the Lord remembered Rachel and opened her womb. Even through the drama, the manipulation, and envy, the Lord still shows so much love and compassion towards Rachel. And Rachel conceives, she gives birth to a son, and she names him Joseph, the guy who had a coat of many colors. Joseph, his name means, may he add. The end of chapter 29 and the beginning of chapter 30, it gives a vivid picture of how marriages can slowly but surely become eroded and later become broken. And Jacob and Leah and Rachel illustrate the ways the enemy and human desire can creep into the covenant designed by God and break it. And as we discussed, again, loving others more than your spouse. When Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah, and again, equate that with anything. When husband loved blank more than he loved his spouse, or when wife loved blank more than her husband, it created pain, jealousy, and a sense of rejection. But marriage thrives, guys, when love is intentional, when it's demonstrative. It's not just that, I love you. Do you really love me? No, let me show you by my actions. When love is sacrificial, not divided or conditional. Number 2, how does the enemy coming? Seeking validation through performance. And again, Leah, she bore sons left and right. Now Jacob will love me. Now Jacob will love me. But guess what? Jacob didn't give her light of day. She thought having sons would make Jacob love her. Guys, a marriage is never meant to be transactional. Love must flow freely. It can't just be earned by what we do or produce. Number 3, look into your spouse to fill what only God can fill. Both Leah, you can say Leah and Rachel struggled with self-worth. Leah was bearing children, but she wasn't really loved by Jacob. Jacob loved Rachel. She was very beautiful, but she wasn't able to bear him children. Struggling with self-worth and satisfaction in Jacob instead of trusting God's provision. No matter what stage of life you're in, true contentment and peace from God is only found in God, I should say. And when a spouse is asked to be our source instead of the Lord, it's gonna cause disappointment. It's inevitable. Number 4, building your marriage on comparison. Rachel envied Leah's children. And Leah likely compared herself to Rachel. I wish I was as beautiful as my younger sister. She's beautiful. Jacob loves her. And here's Rachel. I wish I was like Leah because she's able to have kids, and I'm not able to have kids. Comparison, guys, steals your joy. I wish we were that family. I wish my wife looked like this. I wish my husband made this much. It's going to steal your joy, and it's going to rock your marriage, and it's going to break your marriage. It blinds you to the unique blessings God has already given to us in our marriage. Number 5, substituting instead of solving problems. Rachel and Leah, we want more kids. We have this problem in our marriage, but how about this, Jacob? You take some of our slaves as substitutes to gain children. Substitutes, they may temporarily relieve pressure, but they don't fix the underlying relational or spiritual issues. And lastly, number 6, bargaining for intimacy. Again, Leah tried to negotiate. All right, Rachel, you want my mandrakes? What is in it for me? I'll give you a night with our husband. Again, intimacy is sacred. It's not a tool, for currency. Don't use it as a bargaining chip because that's going to destroy your trust and that's going to destroy your connection with one another. So know this, guys. Every marriage, again, it will face temptation. You will face fiery arrows from the enemy. The enemy does not like marriage. Those challenges do not need to destroy your love. And know this, if you're ever in a tough place in your marriage, remember, the Lord can restore and mend what's broken.